This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
All our Torah Anytime viewers, because we're on the subject, right? Okay, so tonight we're learning Le'fuah Shlema to Yecheskel ben Tzila. And we also invite everybody to join us, every woman to join us at 1601 Quentin Road at BJX every Thursday at 8 p.m. Okay, so tonight, Ezrat Hashem, God willing, we would like to close off the series the mini-series in the series of reward and punishment. This is a very, very, very important, topic to speak about, and to be honest, it's not spoken about enough. So, the fundamental principle of Judaism is that there is reward and punishment. Meaning, very simple translation, if you do good, you will be rewarded. If you do bad, you will be punished. Now, who decides what's good and what's bad? God, exactly. Whatever it says in the Torah. If the Torah says that it's good, then it's good. If it says if it's bad, then it's bad. You don't decide if it's good or bad. You're not the one who decide, yeah, this is something that's good, this is something that's kosher, and this is something that's not. Only the Torah is the one that decided. Now, when God goes and God judges somebody, it's a very, very, very precise, meticulous, and a very just judgment. Yeah.
You said that you don't really know it's good or bad, but then in the Torah it says you can't do this, you should do that.
No. We cannot decide what's good or bad. The Torah is what decides what's good or bad. Meaning that I don't want to get into, because we spoke about this we spoke about this previously in the Divinity series, but the concept is like this. The concept is that some people say I think this is a good thing to do, and they do it. Meanwhile, who are you to decide what's good and what's bad? You have an infinite, maker, creator to decide what's good and bad, and that's what's really what's good and bad. When you're not you, but generally people, and no, you also have small minds compared to God, right? So who are we to decide what's good and what's bad? Only God, who is there from the beginning to the end, will be after the end and before the beginning, can actually decide what is right and what is wrong. So when God judges somebody, it's a very, very precise and just judgment. As it says in Tehillim chapter 98, verse 9, it says, Yishpot tevel b'tzedek. God judges everybody justly. Everything is very meticulous, meaning that there can never be somebody that takes out of their mouth something that is known as the words, this is not fair. Little kids use it, Israelis use it, right? They use a little bit of different terminology, right? It's zelofer. Right, it's the same thing. All right, you guys couldn't figure out a word, I don't know. So you know why? Because there's no such thing in the Lashon HaKodesh as something as not being pure. Because everything that God does is just. So they had to take something from the English language to put it in because it doesn't exist. So instead of being zelo unjust, zelo fair. That's what they use. But in any case, the concept of everything is very, 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 very meticulous, and what we're going to speak about tonight, the focus of tonight is going to be the way that God judges measure to measure. So measure to measure can be looked at, scary, crazy, or it could look at a beautiful mathematical masterpiece. It's something that really is so amazing. There's a Gemara in Sanhedrin, page 90, that says that what happens if somebody says that the Torah does not speak about Tchiyat HaMetim, resurrection of the dead. Let's say that someone comes and says there's no such thing as resurrection of the dead. What is the punishment for that person? So it's very simple. If you plug in the mathematics, measure for measure. If you say that there's no such thing as resurrection from the dead, then guess what? You're not going to get resurrected from the dead. And be like, well, is it all fair? That's not fair. How come? Well, everything that God does is measure for measure. Now, measure for measure in Hebrew is midah keneged midah. It's something that you hear very, very, very often in Judaism. Now, why is this so special? Why is this something that calls upon that it's a very high order? It's something that is so amazing that God does measure for measure. What's the big deal? What is so special about the concept of measure for measure? So when Yitro went and he met Moshe Rabbeinu, and he said that he heard all that God did, and what did he say? He said, now I know that Hashem, that God is greater than all the other gods. Now what is the thing that he heard? What was the thing that he realized? He heard the concept of measure for measure. Midah keneged midah. What happens to the Egyptians? The Egyptians, for example, let's go through a few examples. Egyptians went and they drowned the babies, the boys, in the river. So what's the measure for them? If they drown somebody in the river, you're going to get drowned in the river. And they got drowned in the Yam Suf. When the sea split, the Egyptians went in, and then the sea collapsed on them, and the Jews were able to walk out free. Everything is measure for measure. This concept is very, very important for people to understand their expertise. This is something I'm sharing with you from Rabbi Shimshon Pincus. So if somebody goes to a rabbi and says, Rabbi, I want to speak to you about some sort of issue. Now, the rabbi, if it's something that the rabbi is able to deal with, it's a specialty, he knows what he's talking about, then this is what he speaks about. For example, let's say somebody comes with a psychological issue. So what people say, listen, I'm a rabbi, I'm not a therapist, go to the therapist, deal with that at the therapist. My specialty is X, Y, and Z. You go do the therapist, that's their specialty. Now, everybody has their specialty, and everybody has something that they could relate to, they could advise to, and they could excel in. Now, what about God? What's God's specialty? Like, what is God? Like, what, So the concept of God is the one and only. God has the specialty of everything. Everything is only one, and one is only God, and God is able to do everything. It's like the whole concept of measure for measure is the fact that God could retaliate and do everything in whatever your power is. So, the Egyptians, you went and you used water. Now we're going to drown you in water as well. If somebody goes to, like a Jewish person says, what do you want to do with Haman? Hitler. What do you do with Haman, let's say? Right? Someone, as bad as that caliber, Hitler or that caliber, what do you do with him? So some people would say, chop his head off, send him into whatever, torture, whatever it is that some people are going to do. Then you ask a lawyer, sue him in court, and then we'll represent both sides, we'll make both money, whatever it is, right? So you know how Jewish lawyers work, right? We'll get around from everybody has their little corner that they will go and work on. But you look at the way that God punished Haman. How did God punish Haman? Everything is measure for measure. Look how beautiful this is. That Haman was the one who he himself brought Esther into the palace. Because Haman was the one who convinced Ahasuerus to kill Vashti. He's the one who says, no, why are you going to do this? If you're going to go and you're going to allow, Vashti to go and be the one to speak up against the king, and the king doesn't, she's not listening to the king, then what's going to happen with all the other people? They're also not going to listen. So Haman said, you're going to have to kill her to keep your respect, right? Street cred, as they call it in the hood, right? You got to keep your street cred. If you want to you got to do that. So they went, and Haman convinced Ahasuerus to kill Vashti. And then what? And then you fast forward throughout the entire story, you see the beauty of measure for measure. Who was the one that built the gallows? Haman. He's the one who built the gallows for himself. Even Haman was the one who the king asked him, what should be done for the king? What should you do for something that the king wants to honor? Haman says, you're talking about me. Take him in his horse, wear the royal crown, wear the royal clothing, and march him through the streets. So what did Ahasuerus say to Haman? You're the one, you're going to take Mordechai, and you're going to be the one that's going to be leading it. Everything led to his downfall. Eventually what happened from that, his daughter ended up, long story short, go listen to my class on the hidden series of Purim, but the daughter committed suicide from that. She saw that to whatever, the long story, I'm not going to get into it. But you look at the entire downfall of Haman, was him. It was God was using his own power against himself. You look at Paro. Paro was the one who was like, let's kill every Jewish baby out there, because the Savior is going to be a Jewish baby boy. So we're going to make sure that no Jewish baby boy is going to come around. So not only was the Jewish baby boy came around, but who raised him? Who paid for the tuition? Paro. He was sitting on Paro's lap playing with the gold and the crown, and that was Moshe Rabbeinu. Paro went and he trained him. He's like, here, why don't you take the best, studies, go into the highest, you're going to be the next, ruler or king, whatever it is. He was raised on Paro's lap. So God, the way that God works measure for measure, it's like when you think that you're going to be going against God, no, God is going to use your power against yourself. That's the crazy thing of it. When you look at somebody let's say somebody who's very powerful. So let's look at between countries, different wars, right? If a country is very powerful in the Air Force, they're going to utilize the Air Force. If a country is very powerful in the Navy, in whatever other area, they want to use that area, ground, air, whatever it is, sea, whatever it is, that's the one that they want to focus on. The way that God works is whatever you think you're good at, I'm going to use that. I'm going to take you where you think that you're strong at. So that is what it means, the one and only. There's only God that has the ability to do that. The beauty of this is that when you really think about it, like everything in life, the way that it goes down is that the people's, for example, let's say somebody is very successful up to a certain point and then they become arrogant. Their fall is their arrogance. Let's say somebody let's not you give that example. Let's keep it PG. But everything that God does in a very, very meticulous and a beautiful way. Do you guys see the beauty in it? Do you guys appreciate that? People will call it irony, like, oh, look at that. It's not. It's all very, very meticulously planned out. Rabbi Shimshon Pincus brings down the question. Karma is another way to speak about God. Universe is another way to call God. People that don't want to call God, Mida Keneged Mida, right? Because they don't want to say that there's a God. Exactly. And it's the atheists who realize there's some truth to it, so they got to put a different spin on it. So they call it karma. They call it the universe told me to do this. It's all God. Whatever. It's somebody who can't convince, they're lying to themselves. But anyways, different class, different time. It is. It really is. It's as simple, yeah.
And just like the people cause their own downfall when they do evil things, Moshe's biggest impediment was his stutter, and he became the leader.
That's beautiful. That's excellent. What you're saying is excellent. Yeah. Yeah. Even it's a perfect example. Thank you. Moshe Rabbeinu's stutter. Moshe Rabbeinu had a lisp. No, it wasn't a stutter. It was a lisp. He wasn't able to speak. Why? Where did the thing come from? When he burned his hand from. So he went and he had a speech impediment. Yet he was the leader of the Jewish nation. He was the one that conveyed the Torah, like what you need speech for. He brought out from the most strongest, tight-knitted, country in the world, like in the depth of black magic, with nobody ever escaping, he was able to bring them all out. Like to such an extent that you think about how it's possible. Maybe he was charismatic. No, it has nothing to do with that. What you see over here is that everything is from God. Everything is from God.
Or is this like the same thing or different? Where a lot of the time Hashem will like give people like really hard like situations.
You mean tests?
I guess like tests of like, let's say abuse or something, and then like they will like go on and become like therapists or open like rehabs. Is that like the same thing? Is it like different?
So you're asking a question that has, forget about layers, different sections, and in those sections there's different layers, and in the layers are different subunits, and even the different subunits there are different zip codes, and in the different zip codes there's different blocks, and in different blocks are different states, and if blah, 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 and eventually once you get to the houses there's different cabinets, and in the cabinets there's different sections. Like that's how heavy your question is. And why do I say that? Because what you're asking is it
I think it was so heavy, but
it is because when you're trying to figure out why God does put somebody in a certain situation, we could start planning from today until tomorrow, but we don't know God's calculation.
No.
So
I'm saying like.
You're saying measure for measure in the future. I understand what your question is.
Could it be that like many things that God gives us is for then it's like part of our like mission, and that's why God gave it to us.
It could be.
Depending on the person.
And it could be not. Like, so that's what I'm saying. It's so many different, like we're not God's accountant, so we don't know where everything plugs in, but it's possible. Yeah, you're right. It is possible that somebody was put in a situation because that's what they're going to achieve. But at the same point in time, you could ask, the reason why I'm saying I don't want to get into it, it's going to be such a, because then you can say, why does this person suffer for their future? Yeah. Why should this, so there's a whole world of situations that go on. So yes and no. So basically I'm not answering your question. Basically I'm saying, good question, good job, let's move forward. Okay, so Rav Shimshon Pincus goes and asks a question like this. It says that there's, the time of the Eliyahu brings down like this. It says that maybe, perhaps, if somebody went and somebody learned a lot of the Torah, learned written or learned his entire life, and then there's somebody who learns very, very little, maybe they will have an equal share in the world to come. That's what the Tana V'Eliyahu asks. So, Shimshon Pincus says, and the Tana V'Eliyahu was, why is this even a question? Like, are you kidding me? Like, let's say you have someone like the Vilna Gaon. Let's say you have a rabbi that learns 22 out of the 24 hours a day. And they exist, right? So you list somebody that's learning nonstop. And then you have somebody that roams into a class every Wednesday night. I almost said Thursday, but I decided to. Every Wednesday night they roll into a class. Halfway through they check their messages in the email because they're the presidents of the United States and they have to figure out what's going on. And then they listen a little bit here. So someone who learned a little, and then somebody who learned 22 out of 24 hours a day. What is even the Havmina? What is even the question to say that they have the same reward? Are you kidding me? One learned so much, one learned so little. What is the connection that they have the same reward? And the answer to answer the question, so the question is a question, if you follow me with that, is that if somebody goes and somebody learns Torah, what happens? They get connected to God. When you're connected to God, God is infinite. So when you're connected to the infinite, you have infinite. Now what happens if someone learns a lot and they connect to God? They also have infinite. So the question is, what's the difference between this infinite and this infinite? You understand the question? So the question is really a good question. Because at one point, like, okay, if you already learned, you're connected to God, that's it, you're done. You're connected, you have infinite. You have the infinite amount of blessing, of reward and everything. Why do any more? At the same point in time, does somebody else who does more, does he get more? And the answer is that for every single additional moment of learning Torah, every single additional mitzvah that you see sort of a renewed, an entire infinite connection. Now the question is, infinite plus infinite is infinite. Like, how do we understand that? And the very, very simple answer is, we have no clue. We cannot understand it. Because this is beyond our capabilities. Rabbi Shimshon Pika says that this is something that we don't understand. But the way that it works, the way that God created it, is that when somebody goes, and even though that you are connected to God, you have that infinite power, you have that infinite reward, you have that connection, it's still, if you learn a little bit more, you're getting a whole new infinite connection. And if you're learning a little bit more, you get a whole new infinite connection, above that. So the basic understanding of this is very simple. The more good that you do, the more reward that you get. The more bad that you do, the more punishment that you get. Now, when we understand the concept of punishment, even when we back up a little bit, when you look at the concept of doing a sin, like when someone does a sin, right? Why would God allow that? Why would God allow to do a sin? Why would God?
Free will.
Oh, very good. So God gives something known as free will. This is that we know, it says in Bereshit chapter 9 verse 6, it says that God created us b'tselem Elokim. God created us in the image of God. What does it mean, the image of God? God has free will, human beings have free will as well. Now, this is a very, very important concept that many people unfortunately misunderstand, that God does not want you to sin. Many people think, okay, God, I sinned, so God wanted me to sin, and then let's move forward. No. God does not want you to sin. But He gives you the ability to do so based on your own free will. You have the ability to go and do whatever it is that you want. In fact, there's a Mishnah in Avodah Zarah that goes and says like this. It says that the Gentiles asked the Jewish sages in Rome, and they asked them as follows. Said, if God doesn't like idolatry, God doesn't want people to engage in idol worship, so why doesn't He just go and eliminate everything that has idol worship? Just destroy it. Just destroy everything else. So the sages asked, but what about, people worship the star, the sun, the moon? Are you going to destroy the entire outer space? Says we need it. What? Because of some fools, we're going to destroy the entire, the entire solar system. Like, where is it going to end? So, the Gentiles thought for a second and said, you're right. Says, then why doesn't God go and God just destroy the idolatry that is not dependent on anything, not the sun, the moon, people that worship, I don't know, a piece of stone that they found. Like, why doesn't God just destroy that? So the sages then said, what happens if all the idolatries that are nonsense are going to get destroyed, but the idolatries that have some sort of purpose are not going to get destroyed? Then what's going to be? The people that are worshiping the sun, they're going to say, aha, you see, this is the real idolatry. You're the fake one. You see, my God destroyed your God. So rather, God gives everybody the ability to do their own free will. You have the own free will to decide whatever it is that you want to do. The Gemara goes on from this Mishnah. The Gemara in Avodah Zarah, page 54b, goes and says like this, and says that God says, not only do the wicked people treat my stamping tool as if it was public property, but they use it against my will. Now, what does that mean? Why is it that there's something known as a mamzel? A mamzel is somebody who is a baby that is born out of the union between a married woman that committed adultery with another man. And out of that union is a baby that's known as a mamzel. So why is that baby created? Like, let the baby not be able to create it, because it's a stain, if you could call it, on the soul, or whatever. Not getting into Kabbalah, but it's a situation. It's also halachically has a tremendous amount of ramifications. So why is it that God doesn't allow it to happen? God prevents it from happening. The answer is that God gave the human beings the ability to have the stamp, to create a divine being. You could go and use it in an illegal way, create a child in an illegal way, a child that is not in the from the purest souls. Again, we can't get into this whole concept. It's a whole whirlwind of questions. What happens with the body? So I don't want to get into that, at all. But obviously, there's a situation here: who we can marry, who she can marry. There's a lot of ramification that comes in. So God says, I'm going to give you the ability. It's in your control. You could do something that it's against my will. I don't want to do it. You force me to go and allow to put a child into this, into this woman. Meaning that you could do something that is not per se what God's will is. God's will is to do the mitzvot. You're going against the mitzvot, so you're going against God's will. Now, if somebody, we could even take this in any aspect. If somebody goes and doesn't, there's an halakha rabbinic, biblical, doesn't matter. Pick whatever it is that you want. And you decide not to keep this halakha. You decide, I'll do everything, but whatever. This is not for me. So God wants this halakha to be kept. God wants you to do this halakha, but you do not want to do it. So in essence, you're changing God's will, per se. Right? Obviously, that if you misunderstand that, that's technically kfirah. Right? So don't take this the wrong way. You cannot change God. God is unchanging. But God wanted you to follow the mitzvot. You're not following the mitzvot. So God gives you the ability to go and act against heaven. Now, the question is why? Why did God do that? Why did God allow us to have such power? You're talking about the ramifications that exist in every decision that we make is mind-boggling. You're talking about decisions that affect all eternity. Everything that you do is going to affect eternity. Where you decide who you can decide you're going to get married, what profession you're going to go into, where you're going to live, where you're going to send your kids to school, has not only a ramification on just what you see over here, for generations and generations to come, forever. It all depends on every single decision you make. Isn't it crazy? Tell it to somebody who already is undecisive, right? Forget about it. They're just going to rip out more here and bang their head against the wall. But if we understand the ramifications of every decision that we have, it's really ridiculous. So why did God allow us to do this? And the answer is that even though the ramifications of doing something bad is so great, the ramifications, if you could call it that, the benefit of doing good is so much greater that it's worth it. The risk is worth all that. All that is worth it. And it's something we spoke about last class. We spoke about that 500 times God rewards more than God punishes. The concept is that all said and done, the reward and punishment, it's worth it. And it's worth it for you to have that. Rav Shimshon Pincus goes and says that he wants to ask somebody who worked in Israel's nuclear reactor in Dimona. Anybody ever drive past by this? Anybody know where this is? No? Okay. So, in Dimona. So, Rav Shimshon Pincus goes and asks him, says, how many years have you been working there? So he said 17 years. So the rabbi asked him, says, hey, listen, do the Israelis have an atomic bomb? So nuclear, says, do they have it there? Did you hear anything about it? Any, water cooler talk? What's going on? Do they have it or do they don't have it? And he said, not only do I have, there's someone who worked in the nuclear reactor for 17 years. He says, not only do I not know if there's a nuclear bomb or not, I have no clue what I've been working on for the past 17 years. They pass me something, they say, work on this, here's the instructions, I do it, I have no idea what I just made. And I pass it on to something else, and then it just goes. No clue. In fact, the Israeli government works like this in many areas. In the Air Force, right? They buy planes from, let's say, America, whatever it is. They go and they deliver the planes and or the tanks, whatever it is. And the Israeli government go and they bring a bunch of different, pieces, and they say, take this part out from America, put this one back in. What is it? Don't ask questions. Usually they're taking things out, putting things in, swapping things here, turning here. No one knows what they're doing. Everything's doing, but yet they're very sophisticated somehow, right? They're just doing something. So the rabbi asked this guy who worked in the nuclear reactor, says, I don't understand, don't you get bored? Aren't you just following this protocol? He says, no. He says, there's such consequences if we mess up. He says, we don't have the opportunity to get bored. He says, we're making sure that there's so many penalties, there's no time to get bored, there's no time to make mistakes, because everything is set up in a particular way. The way that it works is that God gave us commandments. God said, for the next few days, you're going to be shaking the lulav and etrog, you're going to be sleeping and living in a hut. Why? Don't ask questions, all right? There's a bigger picture going on over here. Do it, or there's penalties, right? And then a short while later, you got to lean to the side and you got to eat a piece of cardboard. Why? Don't ask questions. Just do it. There's ramifications over here. We're talking about nuclear reactors over here. We're talking about, now obviously we know, the concept of why we do mitzvot. We know the things of it. But the real essence of why we do mitzvot, it's beyond us. The real essence of why we do things, it's only God. Let's hold the questions. I want to get it because I want to try to get to cover more ground. So at the end of the day, why we do things, it's all in God's hand. And God created the world. God says, you take this machine out and you put this one in. And you do it, and then it flies 1,000 times faster, and it's more powerful, and you don't ask questions, because if you ask questions, you get put in a little black. The truth is that doesn't work that way. In Judaism, you can ask as much questions as you want, but in certain government agencies, when you ask too many questions, right? So speaking about the Russians, so the delayed reaction over here. In World War II, there was the Germans like no one was sure when it broke out. No one was sure where was safe, what was safe to do. It was, if anybody learned the history of World War II and the way that Germany and Russia, it's like a crazy, like the way that everything. You want to see how God's manipulating everything. You see that there's no way that they were able to do any of that other than by God's hands, manipulating it. But when you go and during that time, they weren't sure. There were people from Russia that ran to Germany. There were people from Germany that ran to Russia. They were no one knew what to do. So everyone's escaping to other places, and everybody, So they went over to the Briskerov, and they asked him, "What will be? Like, what are we supposed to do?" So the Briskerov answered something that's amazing. He says, "What will be? That does not matter to me." He says, the only thing I need to know is what is permitted and what is forbidden to do. That's what I do. The rest, what will be, is none of your business, right? That's all in God's hand. You have to do what you need to do. I've had this conversation with people. I don't know, maybe it's only me because I speak to quite a few people on an hourly basis. That you speak to somebody and you have a conversation and they're telling you, like everything is wrong with what the Prime Minister in Israel is doing. Like they could do such a better job in whatever Israel's doing. He's doing this wrong. He's doing this wrong. 5 minutes later, the conversation, changes, and all of a sudden, he's the president of the United States of America. He says, "You know what Trump really should be doing?" And then a few minutes later, all of a sudden, he's running Amazon, and he says, "If Amazon would be smart, this is what they would do." I'm like, this is a person. And by the way, this is what I'm explaining is a typical. What we call them yentas, whatever, a typical, person, and they decide they know what's best. They know exactly what's best. This is what they should do. This is what they should do. This is what they should do. If you ever ask anybody for advice, right away they'll be like, of course I know what to do. And you go and they answer you everything that you need to do. The way that you know if it's good when you're asking a person for advice, if you're asking this person a lot of times for advice, and sometimes they say, "Listen, this is not my expertise, go speak to this person. This is who you need to focus on." Or they speak to this person, this is who you need to focus on. Because that's someone who knows where they are and they know what their strong parts are and they know where they're able to advise on. When we're going and we're deciding what's best for this and what's best for this situation and what's best, none of our business. We have to obviously do our research, ask the right questions, make the right decisions, but ultimately, it's all in God's hands. Everything is God's hand. But at the same point in time, everything is in God's hand, but every decision that you make, you're responsible. You're either going to get reward or punished for your decision. You realize that let me ask you a question like this. Is there a neutral thing to do? Think about it for a second. I'm not going to answer that. Is there a neutral thing to do? Is there something that you could do that's not... No ramifications, no reward, no punishment.
Either someone's gaining weight or losing weight.
Breathing.
Right. So, I'm not going to get into that, but it's a very if you think about that for a second, there is nothing neutral that you do, or there is something neutral. I don't know. I'm not telling you, right? Either way. But if you think about that for a second, look at what every decision in your life is going to bring you, either reward or punishment.
That aren't outright bad, but they're not great either. They're kind of just gray.
Yeah. If neutral is gray, then neutral is bigger than gray than black and white. So whatever it is, there's a reason why I didn't want to get into it, and that's one of the reasons. Oh, okay. So now when you're looking at the decisions that we make nowadays, the ramifications are so much greater than it was, let's say somebody doesn't keep Shabbat nowadays. So back, you're talking about, let's say, 100 years ago, right? Somebody wanted to break Shabbat. So, all right, they go and they light a match, whatever it is, they want to smoke. They're doing something they carry, whatever it is, they're breaking Shabbat, right? So that they're breaking Shabbat, they're breaking one prohibition, two prohibitions. Nowadays, somebody gets into their car, turns on the engine, and drives for 45 minutes. You know how many times they broke Shabbat during that time? It's an unbelievable amount of times that they did every time that the sparkle. You're talking about thousands upon thousands, hundreds of thousands. I don't remember the exact number. Somebody once sent me, there was a mechanic who sent me once a breakdown of it based on the RPM. It's crazy the amount of times they break Shabbat. So the ramifications that we have nowadays is not like, okay, fine, I broke Shabbat, I drove something. No. You don't understand the ramifications of what it means to drive somewhere. You don't know what it means if you're using your computer, you're using a TV on Shabbat. What is the ramifications of every single thing that you're doing? Rabbi Salanter was brought up an interesting. It's tonight. It's the fun game that you get to play right in Brooklyn. Gunshots or fireworks. Yay! Let's play the game. Okay. So now because you ever Give me 1 minute. You ever walking, driving, whatever, and all of a sudden you hear like a large explosion, and I don't know. Near me, it happened so much that I'm like, yeah, probably a tire popped. Somebody. Last thing I say would be like when I was, today my kids had, Baruch Hashem for camp that they're off today for some reason. Yeah, so they were off because Jews have to celebrate for some reason July 4th. I don't know. So my kids were off, and we took them to the park, and then there was a large boom. And for a second, I stopped for a second, like, oh, what is that? It's a very loud noise. And then it didn't even stop. For a second, I was like, whatever, nothing. I'm like, how do you know? Like, why didn't you go investigate that? Like, there's like little children right now. It's not, it has been before that there were maniacs that were walking around with, armed with Bibles, and things. It's something that we're so used to it, we don't even realize, like, you become desensitized to it. You become desensitized to these things. Okay. Anyways, Rabbi Salanta, right? So Rabbi Salanta went and says, people picture that they go into heaven after 120. They're going to have a bundle of sins, a bundle of merits. They're going to go over there. They're going to put their sins on the table. And okay, fine, listen, obviously we have to pay for the sins. So we're going to do whatever it is that we need to do to pay back for those sins. And then we'll have Gan Eden forever. Because the sins, Gehenom, right, for a certain amount of period for most people. Right? For certain people, extra credit they did, obviously, then they're staying there for a very, very long time. But for the majority of the people that were good Jews, they stay for a short sentence. So they go over there, and they figure that they're going to go into heaven eventually, and then they're going to stay there forever. So Rabbi Salanta, how do you know that? He says, what happens if somebody goes, and Rabbi Salanta says that somebody he's likely to eat the mitzvah and eat the tzimmus, the dessert, in this world, meaning that sometimes a person could go and use his reward for his mitzvot in this world. So how do you know when you're getting to the next world that you have anything in the reward pile? Maybe you used everything in this world. So Rabbi Yitzchak Blazer goes, Rabbi Yitzchak Blazer says in Kach Be'ar, he goes and explains like this. He says that when Avraham Avinu went and he defeated the 4 kings, and he went and he saved Lot, and he was scared. He was like, maybe, he was worried. What was he worried? He was worried that the fact that maybe I used up all my merits. Listen, look at his history. He went and he was saved from Nimrod's fire. He was thrown into the fire furnace, and then he got out. And he won the battle. He's like, maybe I lost something. And who's he afraid of? You're talking about Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu had 10 tests. He literally put his son up to be as a korban, as a sacrifice to God. And he was nervous, and maybe he went and he used up his merits. So the concept of using up your merits is not a far concept. The Gemara Sanhedrin, page 101a, goes and says like this: says that Rabbi Eliezer was one time sick, and when he was sick, his students came, and he was on his deathbed, and they were crying. Rabbi Akiva, one of his other students, came and he started to laugh. So he said, why Rabbi Akiva? Why are you laughing? So Rabbi Akiva said that his entire life he saw that his rabbi everything was very successful. Everything was where his wine didn't sour, his flax didn't spoil, everything was going well for them. So he thought maybe my rabbi is getting the reward in this world and not in the next world. But now that I see that he's suffering, now that I know that he's getting reward in the world to come. So there is a possibility that you have reward, right? We're talking about reward and punishment. You have reward, but how do you know that maybe your reward is used up in this world? How do you know that your reward is going to stay for you for the next world? So we're going to give 3 different answers. First of all, we have to understand the concept of how is it possible to use up reward, right? One mitzvah that you do is worth so much more that all the benefit and power in this world, all the pleasures in this world doesn't even equal to it. So how can you use up your next world reward in this world if it doesn't balance out, if there's no currency? 500 to the punishment, 500 to 1 to the punishment. But you're talking about different. You're talking about reward over there to reward over here. Now that's not 500 to 1. That's worlds apart. Not even 5 billion to 1. Different worlds. So, and the Gemara in Kiddushin goes and says that there's no reward for mitzvah in this world. There's nothing comparable. However, there's a very interesting concept that when, let's say somebody's traveling in the desert, and they're traveling in the desert and they are so thirsty. Have you ever been so thirsty and you're looking around and there's like, and so imagine you're traveling to anybody ever been to Israel? That's what I would assume where people be in deserts. Anybody been in a desert in Israel? Yeah. And you're doing a hike and there's nothing to buy in the area, right? Yeah. Salad, what did you say? Oh, Masada, yeah. Well, Masada, there's drinks everywhere. But I'm talking about a real hike, like a place where there's nothing. like not an organized hike, like you get lost hike, like one of those type, right? So, and let's say imagine this person is hiking, and they're so thirsty, and they see Ahmed with a pushcart, in the desert with a little umbrella, and he's selling soda, and you're like, no way, and you run over. It's not a mirage. It's really, he's standing over there for some odd reason, who knows, right? He's going over there, and you're like, do you have, what do you have over here? He says, we have Coca-Cola, right? Everything only Coca-Cola, and you're like, okay, is it kosher? And he's like, yeah, of course, kosher. Yeah, they have here, right over there, the hefsher. Over there, it's the OU, somehow gone to Israel, right? And you got the hefsher on the soda itself. Everything is kosher. You're like, that's unbelievable. There's one problem. You don't have small change. You ask him, how much is this? He says $1 or whatever, 5 shekel. And whatever the currency, 3.5, right? So you're like, all you have is a block of gold. Right? Because whatever, you're a high roller. So you have this block of gold, and you're like, you have change, for like 15 grand? And be like, no, I have, a few shkalim, a few dollars, but that's about it that I have over here. No credit card, there's no internet, right? So there's nothing that he's like, so you have here a block of gold, and you have a can of soda that you really, really, really need and want. And you're like, so you tell him, like, can we do something? He's like, there's nothing to do. So he says, either you pay me the price for the soda, or you go. I'm not giving it to you for free. Nothing here is for free. So what are you going to do? Are you going to go, and if you're so thirsty and you're dying of thirst, you'll give that block of gold worth 10, 15 grand to this Arab merchant to take a cup of soda or a cup of water. It's worth it. There's no other option that you will have. Even though that it's not a true payment, even though that the payment is not really equal, of equal value. The same thing is in this world. Really, in this world, there's nothing of equal value. But if you use up your rewards because you're not utilizing your decisions, your free will properly, that means you're paying for things that you're using in this world illegally. It's going to use up your merits. And what are you going to do? It's $15,000 for something that's worth $1. Oh, it's not fair. Be like, no one asked you to buy this. Keep on shopping. Keep on walking. Oh, you wanted this? Okay, so get it. So how do we understand this concept? How do we let's break this down. Rabbi Salman says, and we brought this down before, this world is a very expensive hotel. That at the end of the day, you're staying at this expensive hotel, you're going to have to pay the bills. You're going to have to pay the room, the charge, you're going to have to pay if you took little chocolate chips or whatever it is in there, opened up a bottle of water, you're going to pay $65 for that water, right? Because it was water directly from heaven, all water is heaven. But anyways, this is water from heaven with the price of heaven, right? And you're going and you're paying for everything that you have to do because that's the bill that you have to pay. But what happens if, let's say, you work for a certain company and you're working for this certain company? So when the bill comes, you're like, okay, you just swipe it on the company credit card. There's no problem. You don't have to worry about anything because this is a business expense. So it says Rabbi Salman that it all depends on how you are. If you're in this world, you're a profitable businessman. And that's not talking about in the financial aspect. That's talking about in the spiritual aspect. You're doing what you need to do. You're following God. You're following the Torah. You're following the mitzvot that you need to do. And you're doing everything that you need to do. So fine. So you use something. That's on God's account. But if you're not listening to God, if you're not following the Torah and mitzvot, and you decide you want to live your own life in God's world and you're not following the rules, you better pay up. And you don't have anything to pay up, so it's going to come out of your reward. Oh, but it's not fair. No one asked you to buy. You wanted to buy, that's the price. You don't want to buy, you want to buy soda? $15,000 gold bar. You don't want to buy it? Keep on walking. Oh, you wanted to use this world illegally for your pleasures without using the correct ways? So guess what? You're going to end up paying. What's going to be your currency of your rewards? That's answer number one. Answer number two. If Rabbi Yitzchak Blazer goes and says that Chilul Hashem, desecrating God's name, is the worst sin. So worse is that all the suffering in this world is not enough to remove the sin of Chilul Hashem, desecrating God's name. Says Rabbeinu Yonah that there is a way that you could atone for Chilul Hashem. How is that? Through a Kiddush Hashem. But if you desecrate God's name, the way that you atone for it is by making a Kiddush Hashem. What? Ultimately, yeah, to that extent, that's what the Rambam says. That's going to be the final part. Even after all the suffering, a person has to go and die. The Rambam says that in Hilchot Shuvah. But if you want atonement without that, if somebody wants non-death atonement, or like a little bit of a better option, it's a kiddush. Not a little bit, a lot of a better option. That's a kiddush Hashem. So how do you want to protect your reward in the next world? What you need to do, very simple. Sanctify God's name. How do you do that? Different class. Okay, you can figure it out of yourself. Right? Sanctify God's name, right? And it doesn't call with Allahu Akbar, Okay, none of that. Honey, here's something funny.
We see it happening. They actually, people who do bad things, they're showing a bad example of what is, so they're sanctifying God's name by showing them the punishment that get.
I didn't follow that. Say one more time.
Like if someone's doing something bad, right?
Right.
And then someone's doing something good, then they both get equal measure for what they did. So they're sanctifying God's name by showing that evil gets punished, technically, isn't it?
Technically, yeah, but you don't see that. I'll tell you what I've seen, but I had a student of mine that told me a story last Shabbat, and I was like, when I heard this, I'm like you're ridiculous, you know, like what did he do? He goes, and when he was in Israel, he went and I don't know how the story came about, and I don't recall everything, but all I know it was two people arm wrestling. One was a yeshiva bachar, the other one was a Palestinian, right? How it came, I don't remember the connection, but it ended up that way, right? So there was a yeshiva guy and a Palestinian. They were arm wrestling, and so my student goes. He had a flip phone. He takes a phone and he's as if he's taking a picture. Now the Palestinian sees a flip phone, right? Obviously they're living in the gutters, but they don't know what they've never the flip phone. Like, what do you mean? They have the smartest, most advanced cell phones over there. Like, what's a flip phone? He's like, and so my student's like pretending to like take a picture. And then he's like, just kidding, doesn't have any pictures. And then my student says, he opens up the phone and he goes, boop, 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 boop. And he's like, I'm like, don't joke about that. Like, he was literally joking about making an explosion sound, you know, like, he's like, and he was explaining to me, he's like, you get it? Because the Palestinians, they blow themselves up with the cell phones and the bombs. And I'm like, there's certain, you don't make jokes. You don't make jokes when you're on TSA line about bombs. You don't go, doop, boop, boop, boop. Yeah, did I pack my own bags? No, of course not. I collected it on the curb for $150. Someone paid me. I'm traveling this bunch of white bag of stuff over here and a bunch of green bag of stuff over here. I don't know what this is. You know, like, there's certain things that you don't make jokes, right? To the TSA and to the people that you may or may not suspect as being those people that may do the boop, 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 right? Those are the people that you don't make those jokes to. So, like, when you know, I don't know how we got to the explosions, but yeah, welcome to my mind. Okay, so anyways, going on, Rabbi Chaim Shmulevitz, while we're on the subject. So one, we said to protect your reward, he says you do a Kiddush Hashem. Rabbi Chaim Shmulevitz goes, and the third way to say it, the third way to protect it, is he brings down the story of David HaMelech. Natan Hanavi, the prophet, went over to David HaMelech, and he wanted to go and give him reproof for the incident with Bathsheba. And he goes and he starts and he asks David a question. He says, two men are in town, one rich and one poor. The one that's rich has many, many flock, has many cattle, has many things. The poor one has one cattle, one sheep, one little lamb. And the rich man had a bunch of people come over, and he wanted to go and, basically slaughter and produce some meat for his guests. So he decided, but he didn't want to take any from his own cattle. So what he decided he's going to do, he's going to take from his neighbor's cattle, the poor person, and he takes the one cattle that this poor person has. He steals him. He shucks him, and then he serves this food to his guests. Says the prophet to David HaMelech. He says, what should be done with this type of person? David HaMelech got very angry. He says, this person, he deserves death. This is a death penalty. So the prophet goes over to David and says, you're that person. He says, you had everybody that you were able to do. Why did you take Bathsheba? Why did you take Bathsheba for it? Rabbi Chaim Shmulevitz goes and asks a question like this. He says, why did Natan have to go in a little bit of an allegory? Why didn't he just go and give him the rebuke, give him the reproof straightforward? Why did he have to go through an allegory? Why did he have to go through all a roundabout way to go and tell David what he wanted to tell David? And the answer is, says Rabbi Chaim Shmulevitz, is that a price has to be fixed to the sin that he just did. Now, what is the price? Who is the one who's going to decide the price? Measure for measure. You're going to be the one who's going to decide the price. So the prophet goes over to David and says, what is the price that should be? He gave the price, and then he gave him back. And then he says, you are this man. The way that it works, says Rabbi Chaim Shmulevitz, is that every single one of us, is a very, very important concept. We set a price to our reward. We set a price to what is valued. So, for example, let's speak about for a guy who's learning Gemara. He's learning Gemara, and then he gets a phone call. And it's a phone call. Sometimes there's important phone calls, sometimes there's not important phone call. This phone call, not so important. He picks it up, he's like, hey, what's going on, what's up? And he starts schmoozing with his friend. So what he's really showing is that this phone call is worth more than this Gemara that he learns. right? So he's putting a price to the Gemara that he's learned. So let's say there's, somebody that has to dress modestly, and the people, that is very important are the people in this room. So you have over here an option that you have to dress modestly or you don't dress modestly. So you say, okay, I'll dress modestly when it's cold. When it's hot, I'm not going to dress modestly. So you're putting a price. So the price of modesty is all depending on the temperature outside. That's what it's valued. Oh, but if it'll be worth more for you. So you're the one who decides. It's a very scary thought. You're the one who decides what your own value of your own mitzvot are rewarded as. If somebody has a class that they go, let's say, every Thursday night, whatever, throwing out a day, right? Every Thursday night they go to a class. But then they say, okay, listen, I just want to eat ice cream at home. I just want to sit at home and eat. I just don't want to buy. So ice cream is worth more than a class for you, right? Whatever. It's nothing to do with this class BJX every Thursday night at 8 p.m. It doesn't have to do with that. But it happens to be you're putting. It's a scary thought. It's a very, very. You're putting the reward on it. So let's say you have your niece's dog's birthday, and it's like a class or a dog's birthday, and it's not a bar mitzvah, but it's a birthday. Whatever. You have different You're like, okay, so everything that you do in life, you're putting reward for it. You realize that you're driving in the car. You have the ability to listen to a class or listen to music. Now, I'm not saying music is not allowed. I'm talking about kosher music. You're allowed to do whatever it is that you need to do. You're relaxed. You need to unwind. But the fact is that let's say you're relaxed, you're unwind. You're like, I could go for a class, but you know what? I want to listen to this song for the 10,000th time. And you play that song. So you're putting a value to your mitzvot. Rabbi Chaim Shmulevitz goes and explains that you could. You don't know, but you're setting up. You're your own accountant for the next world. That's the scariest part.
So what happens with that? So somebody chooses music. What happens in the next
music
world?
could be a good thing.
Are you talking about music also?
No, in general, anything. Okay, so then what happens? You're choosing, let's say the music, or not just you. So then what happens?
So the reward that you're going to get is based on what Chaim Shmulevitz is going and explaining is the reward that you're going to get is I want to say partially connected to the importance that you put on something. So some people, let's say for example, it's not how committed you are, it's how important. Everybody falls. Let's put it that way. It's how much you value it. Yeah, it's how much things that you value. Put it this way. Let's look at it the flip side. Let's say it's very, very difficult for you. And this is where I think you'll understand that a lot better. If it's very difficult for you to come and learn or dress modest, let's speak about dressing modestly, right? Let's say it's very, very difficult for you to dress modestly. And I'm not the one to judge because I don't know. I don't know about these tests, Baruch Hashem. But it's very, very difficult to dress modestly. And you go and you work to dress modestly. And then there's somebody else that's very easy to dress modestly. Are those two people getting the same reward? No. They're not. You're right. The one that's more difficult gets it. Sorry. Okay, you get a much higher reward because it's more difficult for you. Meaning that the measure for measure, I don't know if you understand where we're going with this. The measure for measure is not only in an aspect of divine punishment and retribution, it's also the level of the punishment and the retribution. It's everything that goes. That's what I'm saying. The more that you think about it, the more crazier and beautiful that it gets. We could go on and on about this for hours to break it apart, but it's if you just let your imagination run a little bit on it, everything is on it. The importance that you put on it, the reward that you get on it. Everybody has their own tests in life, and everybody's going to get rewarded based on their own tests. So, right, that's right. It says everything is depending on your, on the difficulty and your actions on it. Let's finish off with a thought like this: that Moshe Goldstein goes and brings us down, and he says, and I actually quoted Moshe Goldstein a few times in this class. Let's say somebody goes and doesn't, he was religious and goes off, decides not going to be religious anymore. So let's say somebody grew up very, very religious, and then they decided they're leaving everything behind. So the first time they do that big sin, they think that there's going to be a lightning come down from heaven, going to zap them, and they're going to die or whatever. It's like crazy thing is going to happen. And then they go and they do that big sin, and they're looking around and no punishment. Well, you look at that, and then they do it again. And when you speak to people that went off, and they were very religious and went off, they say this very concept. I thought the world was going to end. I was going to eat something not kosher, and I thought the world was going to end. And they ate the not kosher, and the world just went on. And they're like, oh, look at that. Well, what's so big deal about it? Everything goes on. And it's a very big problem that nowadays a lot of people don't speak about the concept of reward and punishment. People don't understand the concept of reward and punishment. Even people that were raised and brought up in a religious environment. Reward and punishment doesn't mean that the second that you do something bad, God is going to zap you from heaven. The second that you go and you break Shabbat, that you're going to, get electrocuted by whatever it is that you're doing.
Or it's taught in the wrong way.
Whatever it is, right? Okay. It could be right. It could be taught in the wrong way, but.
It's all about that, and they don't teach that God loves you, because I got taught that way, and it really turned me off.
That what? That God.
Whatever you do, you were gonna burn in hell, and the fires are going to come. And
right. So
get you.
the truth is, when you're dealing with strict divine punishment, you have to deal with both. You have to deal with reward and punishment. Now, people get turned off sometimes for right reasons, and sometimes people get turned off because they're just looking for a reason to get turned off. I'm not nothing to do with you, but I'm saying yeah, I know, but I'm saying that people, it all depends on the way that it's conveyed. It also depends on the person that's receiving the message. What's the background? What do they want? If somebody that's been abused their entire life, if somebody that went through so many hardships, and then they come and hear that they're going to go to Gehenna if they do blah, 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 they're like, you know what, I had tortured my whole life, and in the afterlife, so everybody has their own, so on a personal, well, it's still no excuse, you're right, but everybody you have to do on the same level. But as an overall, as people that are speaking in the public, people that are teaching in the public, you have to have both. You have to have reward, and you have to teach about punishment. Because guess what? You need to know if you're going to get punished for something. It's not going to be like, you get up to heaven and be like, well, you didn't keep Shabbat, you didn't keep modesty. Oh, but you're such a good person because you're so funny. Whatever it is, be like, why didn't you come upstairs? Yeah, forget about that. Come upstairs. It doesn't work that way. As much as I wish that it would, it doesn't. The way that it works is everything that you do, you get either reward or punishment for it.
Can't you still be let's say a person who isn't religious? Can't they still get rewarded for things if they are a good person?
Yeah, it could be. Again, I'm not God's accountant, so I don't know. But God works in mysterious and amazing ways. So yeah, God could be. But am I going to say, put it this way, there's no excuse for anybody not to keep Shabbat, and not to keep kosher, and not to be religious. Unless it's a life-threatening situation. Besides, that's what the Torah tells us. Besides that, does anybody know, is there any other way to go and violate the Torah?
Some people just need time to get there, though.
Okay, fine. As you want to take baby steps, take your baby steps. But the baby steps got to go to big boy steps or big girl steps, and eventually it's got to take to adult steps, and then you go. Some people are in baby step mode for the rest of their life. And you'll be like, yeah, there's time, but you don't got the time. You're halfway through the grave, and you're not, you're still doing your baby steps. Then it's a big problem. Again, I'm not judging, or I am, but I'm not. I shouldn't, and I won't, so I will. It is what it is. This is what the Torah says, and we got to follow it. As much as you have to understand, it's not something people that speak harsh do not enjoy it. It's not let me make them suffer. And be like, well, maybe some do, I don't know. But majority of people don't. It's not enjoyable to be like, hey, if you're not going to listen, it's going to be very hot for you. Not in a good way. Not in a Miami, Florida summer way, right? That's not, whatever, depending on who you ask, if it's a good way or not. But it's going to be very, 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 very difficult for you. That's what it is. That's what you need to do. Let's explain it like this. The one thing that you need to know, and this is very, very important, is that whatever you decide in life, God is going to get his way. That's the end of the day. How is it going to come about? That's up to you. So meaning, let's use this example for let's say somebody, type of person that loves cake, right? This is the type of guy that he's like, he gets the calories just from the, he just smells the cake and he's right away 5 pounds, right? He just just everywhere, he breathes it in, right? It's it's inhaling it. And, so obviously he weighs a little more than he should, and the world is tilting a little bit, right? It's not on its axis anymore. And he goes to the doctor, and the doctor says, hey, listen, you're on the brink of diabetes. You better watch yourself. And his wife is over there and says, from now on, we're going to... Obviously she's not speaking that way, I'm just... Whatever it is, but... Yeah. So she says, from now on, you're going to eat broccoli, and you're going to eat salad, and then you're going to cry. It's going to lose your weight, right? And then the guy goes, and he's on this diet starting after Shabbos, because, obviously it doesn't count for whoever decided that. I don't know, God doesn't matter, calories don't count on Shabbat. So anyways, so he goes, and he starts his diet. A week goes by. He's miserable, he's angry, he's crying, his wife is crying because, whatever. It's a whole situation, right? Everyone's losing weight. So, and then finally, comes, he's walking down the street, and then, his addiction comes back. He smells that aroma. He's like, he's like, he swivels into the bakery and inhales some cake, and he's like, you know what, I'm only in a diet at home, I'm only modest in a certain zip code, whatever it is, right? Certain people, right? So he goes and he starts eating again. And meanwhile, he's eating until finally he has to go back to the doctor. He gets and he says, listen, now it's the time to decide which insulin we're going to give you. Like, what's your dosage of insulin? Realize that now it's serious. So he's like, okay, now that he has to take it, now it's like getting serious, and now he's like on a very serious diet, right? And it lasts for like 3 weeks, and it's almost going on the 4th week, and then there's a huge kiddush in shul. And he goes over there, and then he falls at, and while he's pounding all his delicious olam haba, and he's going inside over here, and suddenly he collapses. He gets rushed into the hospital, and all of a sudden, Hatzalah comes in. It's a crazy thing. All of a sudden, he's in a situation where he's in an emergency room. He realizes it. That's it. Now he's really losing weight. And he's not touching cake again. Like, he went through this situation. He went through the punishment. He went through whatever he went through, and he's like, no more. No more breaking, no more falling, no more going down. I'm going to fix myself. And he goes and he loses weight. Now, did he have to go through that process? No. He could have gone and avoided all that by losing weight right in the beginning. But yet, he thought that he was better, he was smarter, and he was going to go this way. At the end of the day, God is going to get his way. The question is it going to be through insulin? Is it going to be through the hospital? Or is it going to be just without all of that? At the end of the day, you have to do what you need to do. Whether you like it or not, whether I like it or not, we all have to do what we need to do. The question is, are we going to listen to God? Are we going to decide that we're smarter, we're better, we know more, and we're going to decide this way, and then maybe later, and it doesn't work that way. God is going to get his way. Either it's going to be in this world, you're going to get the punishment, in the next world, or you're going to do tshuva. Whatever it is, the one thing that I could recommend to you is not worth it. Right? Listen to the Torah. It's very, 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 very much to your benefit to listen to Torah. In fact, it's so much worth it that the punishment, like we said, is worth it just for the reward that it existed there. It's so beautiful. It's so amazing. There's so much beauty to it that when you go and you delve into it, you realize that not only you get the next world, you also get this world. Because everything that you swipe on this world is all going to be on God's credit, because you're a salesman that's producing profit for God and not working for yourself. And hence, everything that you're doing over here, you get reward over here, and you get reward in the next world. Let's open it up for some questions. First of all, is that very clear? Some people, yeah. Just nod. I thought I was going to be everyone with them. Yeah. Okay.
But then, but I get
It is, but it's
saying but then if you can decide what kind of types you're going to kind of what's going to get the action.
You mean what is going to be your punishment and what's going to...
If you everybody has to what they have to do. But let's say, whatever, you got to listen to music, so share. So now from now on, whenever you're going to...
So I have to be very clear. It's never, nothing in life is black and white. So if let's say somebody...
You're in a very bad mood and you need to listen to music.
Right, if you need to listen to music, whatever it is, I'm not...
I'm not saying no. You are normal, whatever. Yeah, it's a normal situation. It's just you rather want to listen to music. That's to share now.
Which is fine. Am I going to say you're going to get punished for that?
Not punished, but you think you're setting a price for it, which is...
Yeah, that part, that's Rabbi Chaim Shmulevitz. That's not me. Yeah. Well, nothing is me. I'm saying, yeah, but let me say...
Well, from now on...
No, from now on, does that mean that every single time you're able to you realize something very important?
It's bigger than it's harder.
So let me explain it like this. Every single... So maybe it's a good thing that you brought this up. Here, let me explain something like this. Every single prayer that you have, every single prayer that you do is unlike any other prayer that you had before. Every single prayer that you... So let's say somebody goes and prays 3 times a day. Right? For men, requirement. Right? You pray 3 times a day. Every single prayer is nothing in worlds different than the prayer that they had before. Even though they're saying the same things, they're going to the same... But there's a whole different... There's different emotions, there's different background, there's different psychological, there's different situations, different standing, different tire, different food. There's so many things that the equation is never the same. So even though, let's say you go and you decide, you pray once and you don't pray it every time, it doesn't mean that all your prayers now are exactly this value. Right? Again, I'm not God's accountant, I'm not God's actuary. So I don't know the formula that God's going to use and say, okay, well, you use this over here, and blah, 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 and all these state cases, and plug it all together and do that. All I can do is what Chaim Shmulevitz goes and explains. And he says that each and every single one of us, to a certain extent, we put a price to our own mitzvot. Oh, does that mean that every single, let's say you're so exhausted at one time you need to do something, and you do it. Does that mean that it nullifies everything else? Not necessarily. Maybe yeah, maybe no. I don't know. I'm not God's accountant.
I think like it's kind of like I'm saying this is like different, but it like talks, but it has to do with this. I feel like when you are like on like a higher like level and like you like always like take things on and like you're growing, Hashem will like then expect more like from you, but then like in the end it also like benefits you because it like makes you a better person.
Right. So once we get, everything goes hand in hand. Everything is zelu madzeh. Everything is hand in hand. Everything is on a balanced scale. But my purpose was to give you an understanding of it, not to go and try to figure out what's your weight in everything that you have done in life. We don't know that. But the concept over here is to realize the importance of every action that you do. Every action that you do has importance. Don't think about it the negative. It's very important to think about it the positive. Meaning that it's very, very difficult for you to do something and you do something. Think about all that reward that you're going to get from that. So think about it's much easier to accomplish a lot more in life by thinking about, instead of thinking about how much am I going to get punished for this, but rather how much am I going to get rewarded if I do it. So instead of saying, oh, this is bad, but like if it's so hard for me and I do it still, imagine the reward that I'm going to get. If it's so hard to come to a Thursday night class, right, whatever, and I still do it, then look at all the reward that you're going to get for that.
Do you want to just push it for the right?
Push it for the forward, yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to? Oh, also, the concept of like good, like and bad. I feel like if you were saying that, like, I heard like a lot of like rabbis didn't like want any like good in this like world, so like they have like a lot of like suffering instead, but like to God that could also be good in a sense.
The suffering that they have. What you're saying is,
He doesn't want us to suffer.
you're saying the rabbis that moved away from the physical pleasures of the world? Yeah, all the big rabbis moved away from the. They don't. You look at all the big rabbis' houses, right? The tiny little. When I was in Israel, I went to Reb Chaim Kanievsky's house, right? So you walk in, and then there is like Sfarim on the wall, and then you make a left, and you could see into the bedroom over there, and then you make a right, you go into his room, and his room is just like full. He has like a stender, the table, and people just walk around, nothing fancy. He would be able to get a very, very fancy. He's not interested in that. He's interested in just learning. He doesn't even notice that anything else like that.
So some person could have like a fancy house and be just as wonderful. Like
Yeah, they could. Yeah.
I mean, like how we don't really like what could look bad to us is really good in God's eyes. So like you don't know what is good and what is bad.
Yeah, so that's something that you're dealing with more in like Kalman Abd Rahman al Tabavid, Gamzul Tova, everything's for the best. It's a whole different topic in itself, which what you're saying is true. Yeah, everything is really ultimately for the best, even the suffering and even the bad that we see it. Yeah, yeah.
If you're doing good things with that mindset of like, I'm just doing this, like I don't want to do this, but I'm just doing it because I'm getting rewarded for it. I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do. Does that count?
So this is an excellent question. I had somebody that asked me that this week. He came over to me and says, I don't want to do any mitzvot because I'm only doing it for the reward. So is there a point in me doing mitzvot? So I'm like, yes, you do that. Of course you do that. So if let's say somebody's doing things, the concept is mitoch shelo lishma ba lishma, that if someone does something for the wrong reason, eventually it'll come to the right reason. Meaning that if you're doing something for 100% the wrong reason, but it's the right thing to do, you keep on doing it. And yes, you will get rewarded for it. And yes,
But I feel like you come to resent it almost, because like I'm doing it because I have to, not because I want to.
Sometimes you don't resent it though.
it depends.
You learn like to like appreciate it. I'm saying at least like with you, then that's what.
But I mean, get more.
Well, if you're doing it for the reward,
Yeah, you don't want to put yourself into that situation. You're gonna hate it, and then you can do it. It's gonna be more difficult for you. So, generally speaking, let's say you're doing something for the wrong reason, and you keep on doing it because you know that it's right. Can you come to resenting it? It's possible. Is that what you really need to work on is you really need to work on the right mindset of what you need to do. Obviously, continue doing it because if it's right, it's right. So even if whatever it is reason that you need to do it, just keep on doing it. But if it's something that will bring you to resentment, then it's not that you have to stop doing it, it's you have to change the mindset towards it. So people say, okay, maybe I should stop the action. No, stop the thought process. You have to fix a problem at its root, not at its cause. Yeah, I guess, sort of, yeah. Yeah.
The entire system is then like the whole reward and punishment. It's not like on a physical level. So how is it, like, you can't really understand what it is to begin with. How is it supposed to motivate or scare you?
Well,
I don't understand it.
well, we can understand punishment and reward. We just don't understand the depths of it.
I heard
We don't know the right. So we don't.
physical.
You're talking about in the next world. We don't understand
It
what's
can happen.
right, which is 100% true.
The next one.
We don't know the depths, which is 100% true. So we don't know the depths of what is reward and what is punishment. We don't know the suffering, but we do know the concept of good and bad. We do know the concept of reward and punishment. Yes, we cannot comprehend the extremeness of it, the level of it, the understanding of it, but we do understand the basic concept of it. So we know that you do something good, you get reward. Do something bad, you get punished. To what extent? You're right. No one knows how bad the suffering in Gehenna is. No one knows how great the suffering the reward, the pleasures in Gan Eden and the next world in Olam Haba is. We don't know all that. But we do know the concept, and when you have that, you're able to plug that in and say, okay, listen, I know this is good, this is bad, and it's going to result in reward or punishment. What is going to be? That's true. How much pleasure you're going to get or how much punishment you're going to get, we don't know. Because we can't. It's beyond our capabilities to understand.
When
Yeah.
someone, let's say, goes through a certain difficulty and they overcome that challenge, Hashem works perfectly, so He's going to reward them in that specific challenge. Maybe in this world, or like the Yidden when they left Mitzrayim, like they were told they're going to get a lot of gold and like money. So someone said, why would they need that if they're getting the Torah? It's because God said that they suffered, like physically, they're going to get rewarded physically. So I'm sure He has it like...
You're saying it's just like somebody who suffers over here should get rewarded in this world in the physical sense?
Yeah, I mean, that sounds...
So what you're saying is actually very interesting. And you look at through history, it's technically it's usually like that on a broad scale. So after every time that the Jewish people are expelled from a certain place, there's always a period of flourishing, of excelling in financial, everything else. So you look at after the Holocaust, right? So after the Holocaust, came about, there was a lot of period of suffering, and then there was a period of tremendous relief. The Jewish people had a state, and Baruch Hashem, for many years, people had financial, the abilities, so people were able to make money, people were able to go. So like they had the ability to do that, and it's always like in waves. So you do technically see that people punish and God gives them a reward, and then they get too much into the reward, and then they fall down, and then whatever. It's a cycle. So in a sense, you see that in a broader spectrum, but when you're dealing on each and every single person's life, we're looking at a person's life in what we see right now. We don't know the previous reincarnations, we don't know what God's plan is, we don't know all the details of it. So yeah, it could be previous suffering is now why you're getting rewarded. It could be a previous reward that you're doing, now you're going to get rewarded more and more. Again, we don't know. The most important thing that we have to realize is that don't look for reasons to say this is why God did this is why God did that. We could look at it and in hindsight and be like, wow, this really worked out for the best for me.
Sometimes in hindsight, like you could really see like how, like, let's say I had a boss that was not paying like the whole school and everything. The school closed down. She's trying a business that's not working. I met someone, like, she was really like not a good principal, and like.
So you could see, yeah, you could see how God punishes and God rewards. But at the same point in time, you could see people that were Nazi commanders and they lived life till the very ripe old age. So yeah, so like, we're not God's accountant. God rewards and punishes each and every single person to their own, extent. Where it's going to happen in this world, the next world, both, we don't know.
So that's like a scary thing, because like I keep like telling myself like I'll get rewarded one day, but like some people don't. You're saying don't get rewarded their whole entire life.
I'm not saying that some people don't get rewarded. The pasuk says the pasuk in the Torah says in B'chukatai telechu, if you go and you follow my commandments, then you will get rewarded. You'll follow, as long as you do what God needs to tell you to do, God will take care of you. How, to what extent? I don't know. I have no clue, and nobody knows. But you follow what you need to do, God will take care of you. That's the way very, very simple concept. You do not lose out if you listen to God.
That's why there's like faith, right?
To a certain extent, yeah.
Yes.
To a certain extent, yeah. Okay. Any other questions? No? No questions from the virtual world? No? Okay. All right. Good. Chazak Baruch.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.